when I actually get to meet the people who are successful recipients. Because you see the competition they've gone through, the stories that they've told, and yet the community that they're trying to build within themselves. But then on top of that, when you're able to witness a Point Scholar who's living in your community, who's making a difference in your community, it makes even the situation much more awesome. And we are fortunate to have that situation with our next speaker, who lives here in Miami. Landon L.J. Woolston describes himself as an advocate, an artist, a social worker, and a trans-pan queer Miami native. For the past 3.5 years, LJ has directly served LGBTQ youth experiencing homelessness. In 2015, LJ became a Point Scholar, was named Out 50 by South Florida Gay News, and named Top 100 LGBTQ Movers and Shakers in Florida by the Florida Agenda. This past year, LJ was honored as the Save Luminary of Equality, and was also appointed as a subject matter expert on LGBTQ youth homelessness by Miami-Dade Mayor Carlos Jimenez's HIV/AIDS task force. Please welcome LJ.
So good morning. It's still morning, right? As some of you may know, I recently went through a very personal tragedy. Over the past 3 years, I fell deeply in love with a beautiful soul named Diana Hemingway. Sadly, the love of my life, Diana, died by suicide on December 20th, 2016. She ended her suicide note to me by signing, "Yours forever, a love that never dies." Truly, my love for Diana will never die either. The memories of the love that Diana and I shared are vibrant, strong, and important. In fact, as I look back, it was Diana that stood by me and supported me through the entire Point Foundation application process. She pored over every word of my application essays. She consoled me when I thought I'd absolutely bombed the phone interview. When I thought I had no chance of being named a scholar, she helped me pack my bags and drove me to the airport anyway, making sure I boarded that plane to LA. We talked on FaceTime multiple times when I was in LA, and she offered me undying support. When I found out I was named a Point Scholar, Diana took me out that night. I remember sitting with her at our favorite local dive bar, and her saying, "I can't believe I'm in love with a Point Scholar." Diana knew how much this meant to me, the network it would connect me to, the opportunities and doors that would open up as a result of being part of the Point family. Diana was my biggest supporter, and so I will continue to be hers even in her death. And I will tell her story, not only because I believe the love we shared was worthy of great novels, of sharing with others, but also because I believe her story speaks to many systemic failures that we must keep fighting to address in our community. At 46 years old, Diana was only 13 years older than me, but she was easily 2 lifetimes wiser. She was an absolutely brilliant, queer, non-binary transgender woman who was also on the autism spectrum. She was known locally and abroad for relentless activism, not only around trans and queer issues, but also sex worker rights, disability rights, neurodivergence, economic justice, racism, and issues impacting the kink community. She exuded selflessness and compassion, particularly toward trans and queer individuals who existed alongside and outside of the margins. In the days following her death, an outpouring of love came from our local community, with many individuals saying that Diana was many things to many people. Some said she had saved their lives and was there for them when nobody else was. Others were angry, myself included, for many of us believe that as a community, we failed Diana, and that by and large, we still fall short. We fail transgender people every day. Diana was truly the most intelligent, capable person I have ever known. And although her ever-evolving exploration of her own sexual orientation and gender expression caused her to lose several families and to encounter ongoing job discrimination, she still managed to live many lives. Prominent environmental activist, ordained minister, master auto tech, code enforcement officer, and thrift store operator. In 2013, Diana thought she'd finally found a home, safety, in LGBTQ work. She became the director of a local HIV testing program carved out specifically to serve the most marginalized people of the trans community. However, as is often the case with local trans initiatives and trans initiatives abroad, Diana's program was eliminated in 2014 without warning, leading her back into the struggle and leaving many other trans people without the resources that they depended on. Left with few options for survival, Diana began, like many of her sisters, escorting in 2014. She described her choice to become a sex worker as one made from a very small set of constrained choices. She spoke openly and honestly about sex work and how it impacts the trans community. She became a prominent sex worker rights activist, writing about sex work for Daily Dot and starting up the first South Florida chapter of SWAP, the Sex Workers Outreach Project. She also spent time cultivating her art. In her own words, her art, her photography, and her activism, as well as the way she openly lived every aspect of her life, were meant to connect the intersections of gender identity, sexuality, disability, feminism, and sex work to advance understanding and empathy for the multiple oppressions that she and others faced. As the story goes for many sex workers in our community, escorting, however, quickly took its toll on Diana. Because sex work is neither legal nor decriminalized in the US, she had no recourse and no real community support when she was raped twice in the work. In our relationship, she told me she finally felt like she was thriving, but that returning to escorting every Monday felt like, well, surviving. Her mind, her body, and her soul were tired of this work, and in 2015, she began applying for formal sector jobs again. She was also struggling with mental illness that she'd managed to beat back with a stick her entire life while formally employed. And when she sought out help for her struggles, she sometimes received substandard, ill-informed care from local organizations that misgendered her, didn't always honor her name, alienated her for engaging in sex work, didn't understand how to serve a neuroatypical person, and employed sometimes outdated or even widely discredited interventions. And I say that as a social worker. Although Diana eventually managed to get her mental health on track after finding a competent therapist and being stabilized on meds, she shared with me that she just felt like she was deteriorating from the inside out, primarily as a result of not having access to employment. We know that employment offers trans people more than a job. With employment comes structure, purpose, community, and often medical benefits. After over a year of job applications, multiple interviews, and what she called soul-crushing job rejections from almost every LGBT organization in South Florida, my love deemed herself unemployable in the fall of 2016. I fell apart when she told me that listening to my stories in social work felt like being a track runner who had lost their legs just sitting on the sidelines watching the race. She was open on social media about her discouragement and her hopelessness around her future, about being burnt out with sex work, about running out of financial resources. She had been homeless 6 times in her life and was struggling with the thought of losing everything and having to start over again in 2017. And then the final blow. She developed what she believed to be a bowel obstruction just a week prior to her suicide. She told me she was worried not only about the medical procedures involved, especially as a trans person, but also about the associated cost of treatment because she did not have health insurance. After 7 days of self-diagnosis and mediocre home remedies, just hoping that her condition would improve, as many trans people do, myself included, to avoid the violence that so often comes along with seeking basic medical care, Diana told me she would go to the emergency room. However, on day 8, she decided that her suffering and her struggle should come to an end instead. And just like that, my love was gone. While the most brilliant and bright life in my life has been turned off, I am determined somehow to keep it lit. Especially because Diana's story is not unique in the trans community. While it is true that she chose when and how to die, I implore us to acknowledge and to continue to rally against the many systems of oppression that loaded her gun. Transphobia, whorephobia, ableism, respectability politics, broken mental and physical healthcare systems. Diana easily could have been a world-class scholar on trans and queer topics, and I truly mean that. She was an incredible writer, far smarter than me, an even more powerful speaker. Yet she faced many of the same struggles as trans people, with intersecting identities do: difficulty accessing quality care, societal rejection, family rejection, community rejection, job rejection, ongoing economic struggle, and repeated episodes of homelessness. So this is where you come in. Were it not for you, were it not for Point Foundation, my story could have turned out a lot like Diana's. It was only a few years ago, after long periods of unemployment and underemployment myself, many forms of rejection, and feeling like I was pretty lost in the world, that I had begun to stop believing in myself, just as Diana did. Although the financial support that I received from Point Foundation was a tremendous help, the most powerful gift offered to me by Point was that of Point Foundation serving as a mirror, reflecting my own worth back to me, offering me affirmation of my very existence as a queer and non-binary trans person in a world that so often tells us we are not enough. In many ways, my education, my community involvement, my volunteerism, my art, my activism, and my job are tightly woven together. Having Point behind me, honoring all of the details in my fabric, has inspired me to continually challenge not only myself, but others. In every space that I enter, I strive to bring in my advocacy, imploring colleagues to educate themselves on LGBTQ issues. In my art and my photography, I bring in activism, encouraging the viewer to challenge themselves, to sit with discomfort, to embrace people and bodies that may be entirely unfamiliar to them. In social justice spaces, I never stop advocating for young people, and especially queer youth experiencing homelessness. Point has provided me with increased self-confidence, motivation, and passion to do the work that I know is so greatly needed in our community. Miami is in dire need of a shelter for queer youth. It is still my dream to see us collectively generate sustainable, safe, and affirming housing for our queer young people. When I dream big like this, when I dare greatly, as Brene Brown would say, my negative self-talk still gets in the way sometimes. It tells me this may never be possible. It's a long shot. It's then that I remind myself that I once thought becoming a Point Scholar was a long shot too. It barely got on the plane. I remind myself that Diana believed in me, that you believed in me, that Point believed in me, even when I didn't believe in me. So sometimes, when this negative self-talk creeps in, I say to myself, hey, wait. You did that, so why not this? So although living in a world where trans people are seen, honored, employed, provide access to informed and quality care, and treated with dignity and respect also seems like a long shot, we must collectively ask ourselves, why not this? And then we must strive to make it so. As a community, we simply cannot stand for one more Diana Hemingway leaving this world without being seen. To the Point Foundation and its many supporters, thank you for seeing me. Thank you for ensuring that my light stayed on. If only more of the world had seen my partner and the love of my life. If only her light were still shining brightly. I believe that is why you are here. That is why we are here. Because we know that we must be the power to keep the lights on. We must invest in our people. We must continue to do our work, and we must strive to do it better. Not only for Diana, but for the many others in the trans community just like her. Thank you.